Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video I'll have the latest from the live radar. Run for the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. It is now very likely that we do reach heatwave conditions later on this week for many parts of England and Wales. So those temperatures really do start to skyrocket. Now, we've had lots of warm air masses around over the last week, lots of hot air masses around, but the big difference this week is it is dry and we are not going to see much in the way of showers and storms, especially later on this week. Now, I have started to see headlines and started to see some hype for this heat wave, and yes, we are likely to reach the technical heat wave threshold. For London, for example, it's 3 consecutive days of 28 degrees or more. We are likely to hit that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, perhaps even longer than that. But I must stress, there are different levels to heat wave in this country. Of course, if we go back over the past few summers, we have reached 40 degrees, but at the moment, in the next 5 or 6 days, 30, 31, maybe a 32 is the max we're looking at. So we're not looking at the ridiculous mid to high 30s, I must stress that, but we are still looking at very warm heat wave level conditions. We will have a look at some of the longer range charts beyond that, and funnily enough, they are all very hot throughout the final half of June. Some runs do actually get us towards those mid 30s, but again, I'll stress that is longer range stuff, and there is not as much support for that. Lots of support for 28 to 32 degrees, but higher than that, very little at this stage. But of course, we'll explore that in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Now, if we start on the live radars, it's mostly dry out there this evening. Bit of rain across northern and western Scotland. Again, some lingering weather fronts trying to push in, but they're not going to have much success as high pressure really starts to take over. Now, recording this just after 8 PM, you can still see it is very warm across much of England and Wales. Temperatures hitting the mid-20s this afternoon, around 25, 26 in the best spots. And it will slowly nudge up over the next day or two, up towards 27 through Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we start to reach those heatwave thresholds Thursday, Friday, Saturday, looking at 28 to 30 quite widely. A couple of degrees higher than that is possible in the hottest spots. But you can see really where it's hottest at the moment. We're expecting it to warm up, at least initially, further westwards, and that's because the area is coming directly from our south. It is going to hit these western portions before it does start to turn more widespread. And we can see that now on the latest UKV. You see a bit of rain around through this evening, but clears away, and not too much going on over the next couple of days in terms of precipitation. Pretty quiet, bits and bobs of cloud, a few hefty showers later on this week. So it's a little bit of instability, but generally speaking, it's dry and it is very pleasant. If we do look at those air masses, though, you see it is warm air around at the moment, around 4 or 5 degrees above average, and it will kind of linger around there for the next day or two, not really increasing much. However, it is as we head into Wednesday evening and Thursday, look at the upper air temperatures starting to climb, especially in the west, starting to hit low to mid-teens come Thursday afternoon, and then it starts to get towards the upper teens in places during Friday and more widely through Saturday. And that's where those heat wave levels could really be started to be stretched. You can see the far south, there is the risk of even the 20-degree isotherm moving in, and that would give us the possibility of getting more towards the mid-30s, but of course a very small slither of heat there. We'll have to wait and see if that does push further in the subsequent days. You can see already westerly flow trying to nudge in, but as we'll see from some long range charts in a few moments' time, some of them do keep the hot air in place. Now again, when we're looking at these upper air temperatures, my rule of thumb for the summer months is the 850 HPA temperatures. You generally add about 15 degrees to get the surface temperature. It's, a couple of degrees either way, depending on how strong the sun is. Right now it's June, so the sun is very high. How hot is the ground? How dry is the ground? We're seeing much cloud, rain, all these things kind of factor into it, but give or take a couple of degrees, it's around 15 degrees. And you can see here, with the upper air temperatures around 13 to 17 degrees, that hits that sort of 28 to 30 degree kind of area, which we are looking at. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, as we head into Tuesday, again, looking at 25 to maybe 27, maybe an isolated 28. To be honest, it's very similar into Wednesday, again looking at 25 to 27, and it starts to climb higher there on Thursday in the West Midlands, 28 to 29, so starting to hit those heatwave thresholds, and then Friday really warming up once again, widely up towards the 29, 30 degree mark. And then Saturday, it does stretch even more widespread, reaching heatwave threshold across much of England and Wales here, 28 to 30 degrees. And suspect it could be even higher on Sunday and Monday, depending on how quickly that hot air does get pushed away. Now, if you have a look at the long range charts now, if we start on the latest GFS, you can see a bit of a westerly flow at the moment. That's why it's not incredibly hot yet. But southerly winds re-emerge later on this week, and they hold on for the majority of the next kind of 10 days. Eventually, we see a bit more of a westerly influence, but it could encourage even stronger southerly winds here as we head later on this week. You can see the very hot air arriving through the weekend, holding on, trying to get pushed away. But this latest GFS actually gets the 20-degree isotherm re-emerging from the south. And yeah, it looks really hot there out towards next week as well. We must remember that if we just saw the 15-degree isotherm set over the top of us, yes, we wouldn't see the temperatures rise rapidly if it stuck around for a long period of time. But we can start to see homegrown heat. And that's what can happen when we see stagnant air masses. So although the air masses here are very hot, and you'd say, well, once the 15-degree isotherm in, if it just sticks around, they'll probably see the same temperature every day. Not always the case. So I suspect here, even though the upper air temperatures don't escalate massively next week, they could be a few degrees higher at the surface just because of the building heat that we can see down at the surface. And you can see that here from this latest GFS. As we just saw, the upper air temperatures hover around the 15 to 20 degree mark, but we don't see any massive spikes or real big pushes and then gets flushed away. It's kind of just mingling around. There's not much movement in those air masses when after the initial hot air moves in. But you can see Sunday here, 30 to 32. Monday, maybe 34, 35, 30 to 32 on Tuesday. Wednesday, look at that, 30 once again, and keeping in that very hot theme before eventually cool air to start to nudge away. Now, I did say at the start of the video, we're not expecting mid-30s, and you may be looking at this and say, well, the GFS just showed a mid-30. However, as we'll see from the ensembles in a minute, this GFS run keeps that very hot air around for a good few more days than the majority of runs, and that's the primary reason for this really hot condition. The majority of runs get to next Monday, Tuesday, when this starts to produce mid-30s, and it does push the heat away. So we'll look at the ensembles at the end of the video, but just shows you what could occur if that heat really sticks around. Now, the GM is as intense as we head into next week, but it does bring something slightly fresher around day 10. Again, if we run it back, high pressure's involved. Look at this big heat dome over the top of us all the way into the start of next week. But look at this, next Tuesday, Wednesday does get pushed away. Doesn't replace it with cold air. It's still above average. If we look at the temperature deviation, it's 4 to 6 degrees above average, but it's not the 10 to 14 degree above average intense heat that we see right here. And again, if we do go into the surface temperatures, you'll be able to see that come next Sunday, we start to see mid to low 30s, 33, 34, and then as we head towards the following Monday, even higher perhaps, 34, 35. But if we look at Tuesday, starting to drop 31, 32, and Wednesday back towards the mid-20s, maybe upper 20s in a few spots. So very quickly, the GM does drop those temperatures. So it does go exceptionally hot for a couple of days, kind of Sunday through to Tuesday, but it's not got that longevity that the GFS does have. So we can say in the near term, we are going to reach heatwave levels, but it could get very hot as we head into next week. So we're not expecting anything ridiculous this week. 30, 31, 32, decently high summer temperatures. Those sort of mid-30s, where it gets really bad, that could come next week, but we'll have to wait and see. And finally, if we compare to the latest ECMWF, again, we start to see high pressure in control. That southerly then pushes in, and into next week, we stay pretty hot, but then eventually that westerly flow, like the GM, does push in. Again, if we run it back, hot air in control all the way to next Monday, Tuesday, and then by Wednesday, fresher air moves in. That's a real crunch point that we need to keep an eye on. Next Tuesday, Wednesday time, will the hot air hang on, like the GFS has, for a few more days, or does it get swept away with some fresher Atlantic air? Still warm, would still be mid-20s, but just not the oppressive low to mid-30s. And you see that from the latest ensembles. Pretty stationary, warm, a couple of degrees above average upper air temperatures at the moment. And it's later on this week really escalates and peaks around next Sunday time, around the 15, 16 degree isotherms. That's looking at 31, 32. I said a couple of the runs showing 33, 34. So it could start to get towards that really oppressive level. And then look at the operational run. It holds that heat for another few days. Majority of runs, though, do drop off. And that's why I said when we looked at that GFS run and it showed getting to 36 degrees, I said the chances of that are pretty low from the latest runs. It does drop off quite quickly, back down to very warm, if not still hot. A good few degrees still above average, but just not quite that ridiculous heat wave conditions. Precipitation picks up a little bit, but not massively. So even if we don't see that very hot air, and even if it does go closer to average, it still looks warm and dry to end June. If you do look at the dew points as well, you can see the dew points aren't ridiculously high. So hopefully that means it's not too humid and oppressive. So it does make that sort of hot air a little bit more bearable. Whereas it was really humid last week, even though the temperatures didn't skyrocket, then you got towards kind of 28, 29 degrees. My gosh, it did feel hot. You can see, though, over the coming days, mid to high 20s, touching 30 degrees into the weekend and maybe starting next week. And then you see the operational run goes up toward the mid 30s there, but you see very few runs get towards those levels. And similar, if we look at the latest ECMWF, again, really rising into next week. Drop off from most runs, but it does hang on. There's a bit more of a hang on there from the operational and more of its ensemble members. So a bit more of a 50-50 split, whereas the GFS was high confidence, apart from the operational run of quite a big drop-off. The ECMWF here is a lot more confident and perhaps a bit more longevity. And if you do just compare to the GM, I'm just interested to see this because of how hot that operational run was. Again, a big spike and a drop-off, but it's a little bit later. It doesn't hang on forever, but definitely a little bit later, more in around 8 or 9 days' time. So yeah, very interesting, conflicting views from the models today. They all agree that it's going to go very hot and getting towards those heat wave levels, maybe very hot and oppressive next week, maybe low to mid 30s. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Still a bit of fluctuations between the runs, but at least we're starting to see some consistency that we are going to be seeing those 30 degree temperatures, those plus 30 degree temperatures. It's just how severe and how long lasting. I do just want to finish by emphasising that at least for this week, the next 5 days, we're not expecting extreme heat. Yes, heat wave levels will be reached Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but we're not expecting mid to high 30s or anything record breaking for the time being. Yes, early next week, if some of these most severe runs come off, then perhaps we will get to that ridiculously high 35, 36, 37 degrees, potentially even push the all-time June temperature record, which I believe is around the 36 degree mark. So we could get there next week. We'll have to wait and see. Still good 7 days away from that becoming a possibility. And yeah, still lots of uncertainty within these runs. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you again for another video soon.